Greetings, YouTube! The Doctor is in. Dr. Urius Papers here, coming at you with another commentary on Dungeons and Dragons. And today we are going to talk about orcs. And in my opinion, orcs are evil. Not 1% of them, not 99% of them, all of them. Just like Knowles, and we're going to tell you why that is. We're going to go through all of the lore of orcs from first edition, as you can see here on the screen now, all the way until the latest iteration of the orcs has come out in 5.24. But first, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you have any questions or comments, please leave a question or a comment. And don't forget to hit that notification bell. All right, let's get the glasses on so we can see something. Magic has happened. Okay, the basic premise of this is that you cannot have a non-evil orc without Gruumsh, or without an evil Gruumsh. Those two things, Gruumsh is the god of the orcs, and those two things are connected. You can't take them apart. So we're going to go through all the orcs from first edition to 5.24. Now, one of the big things about all of this is orcs actually started out lawful evil, and then they became chaotic evil. And so, as you know, there's 9 different alignments in the D&D world, and there's 3 different evil alignments: neutral evil, lawful evil, chaotic evil, and they started out as lawful evil. So here we've got, over here, let's see if I can get my finger up. There it is. Over here, we've got the first edition monster manual up. So I've got some notes down here. We're on page 76 of the Monster Manual. The Monster Manual was published in 1978. The main author on this was, of course, Gary Gygax. And this is what he had to say about orcs. Orc tribes are fiercely competitive, and when they meet, it is a 75% chance likely that they will fight each other unless a strong leader, such as a wizard, evil priest, evil lord, notice the word evil, with sufficient force behind him is on hand to control the orcs. Being bullies, the stronger will always intimidate the weak and dominate the weaker. If goblins are near, for example, the orcs are strong enough, they will happily bully them. Orcs dwell in places where sunlight is dim or non-existent, for they hate light. So, known orc tribes include the following: Vile Ruin, Bloody Head, Death Moon, Broken Bone, Evil Eye, Leprous Hand, Rotting Eye, Dripping Blade. Those don't sound good to me. And so on and so forth. The big thing I want to point out here is this stuff down here. Orcs are cruel and hate living things in general, but they particularly hate elves and will always attack them in preference to other creatures. They take slaves for work, food, and entertainment, torture, etc., but not elves, whom they kill immediately. So that is a big thing. They've got a little description of half-orcs, but this video is not about half-orcs. It is about the orc. There isn't really anything mentioned in here about Gruumsh, their god. Now, they did bring that out in one of the next books that came out. This was actually the first book to come out. Then the Player's Handbook came out. Then the Dungeon Master's Guide. And then the Deities and Demigods. So we are connecting orcs to, let's put their fingers together here. We are connecting orcs to Gruumsh. That is the connection we are making. You cannot necessarily have orcs without Gruumsh. Gruumsh is their god. So let's look at that. Here is the Deities and Demigods, published in 1980 by James Ward and Rob Kunst. And Rob is, out of all of these guys, Rob is the only one that is still alive. Gary's gone, James is gone, Lauren Schick is gone. Rob is the only one that is still around since then. And we've got, great names down here like Jeff D., Errol Otis, David Sutherland, all these guys. And, of course, we've got the cover painting, this brilliant painting by Errol Otis, which, is when, in my opinion, D&D was great. I remember buying this book when it first came out in 1980. Awesome book. Okay, so if we go down to page 97, we will come to Gruumsh. So this was a collection of the gods and all of their stats. And here we see Gruumsh is lawful evil. That goes along with what we saw in the monster manual. The orcs have many gods, but their leader is Gruumsh. So it tells us there are other gods here, but it doesn't say who. His name is never spoken by non-shaman orcs, who refer to him as he who watches or he who never sleeps. So Gruumsh is all-seeing, and if there is an orc that steps out of line, that orc is slain. Gruumsh himself has but one large eye in the center of his forehead. He appears as a huge orcish humanoid. The orcs say Gruumsh commands a mighty army of spirit orcs in hell, and these war continuously with a similar army of spirit goblins controlled by Maglubiet, if you can say that really fast. The orcs always defeat the goblins, but the goblin spirits always reform. To become a shaman of Gruumsh, an orc must pluck out their eye. And the proper worship of Gruumsh requires blood in large quantities, preferably blood from a human or a demi-human race. Remember, in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, the demi-humans were elves, dwarves, halflings, and gnomes. And the humans were on their own, and then the humanoids were the orcs and the goblins and the gnolls and the hobgoblins and so forth and so on. So he represents the belief that Gruumsh watches each and every orc and judges him fit or unfit. So again, that reinforces the point that I have that you can't have an orc that doesn't follow the way that Gruumsh wants them to be. All right, so now we go to 2nd edition. And here's the front cover for 2nd edition from 1989. Project coordinator on this was Tim Beach. And we are going to go to page 281. So by this time, Gary Gygax was gone. He left Wizards of the Coast. Well, he left TSR. I'm sorry. He left TSR in 1985. And to get through a lot of the satanic panic that had happened around the 80s, and also to kind of distance himself from him and kind of recollect all the IP, a new edition of Dungeons & Dragons was created. And this was the Monstrous Manual. And here is the Orc and the Orog. So the Orog actually came from a module that was published in the 80s that came out of Great Britain. A really good one. I think it's the Gauntlet and something else. Really good one. It's like UK 01 and UK 02. Very good adventures. But I digress. We have the orc here. Different picture. Again, these orcs are lawful evil. They are not chaotic evil. So we're here. Lawful evil orcs still. Orcs are a species of aggressive mammalian carnivores that band together in tribes and survive by hunting and raiding. Orcs believe that in order to survive, they must expand their territory, and so they are constantly involved in wars against many enemies, humans, elves, dwarves, goblins, and other tribes. And it talks about their appearance and all that. And then orcs hate direct sunlight, so that's another thing. And it is often believed that orcs are so bloodthirsty and cruel that they are ineffective tacticians and that they would rather be vicious than victorious. Like most stereotypes, this is highly misleading. It is true for some orc tribes, but not for all. Many orc tribes have waged wars for decades and have developed a frightening efficiency at battle tactics. So that is a thing. There is another... I mean, these went on and on and on and on. It talks about orcs are aggressive. They believe other species are inferior to them and that bullying and slavery is part of the natural order. They will cooperate with other species but are not dependable. As slaves, they will rebel against all but the most powerful masters. As allies, they are quick to take offense and break agreements. Orc believe that battle is the ideal challenge, but some leaders are pragmatic enough to recognize the value of peace. So they do recognize peace, but they value battle and territory, and they are over everything else. And of course, they worship Gruumsh, which orcs worship many deities. The chief deity is usually a giant one-eyed orc. That they don't really say Gruumsh here, but it is in the first edition Monster Manual, Gruumsh was not mentioned in the stat block for the orcs. But here, Gruumsh is kind of mentioned, but not totally mentioned. But they do take slaves. They are lawful evil, and they do form a very hierarchical society where there is weak and strong are always on top. Okay, so that's the Monstrous Manual. Then the next book that we got, which was published in 1992, was the Monster Mythology, which was written by Carl Sargent. So this was kind of their deities and demigods at the time. And we're going to go to page 45 because, again, we are connecting orcs with their gods. So here we have the gods of the orcs, and this is where they talk about Gruumsh. Gruumsh is the undisputed head of the pantheon of orcs. In prehistory, one or two now unknown orc gods conspired to depose he who never sleeps and were destroyed utterly. Since that time, Gruumsh has ruled the other orc gods with an iron grip. He is a fearsome, brutal god who revels in warfare and ever seeks new territory for his race. So the orcs are driven by their god and by the vision, no pun intended, of their god, Gruumsh, to take territory and to take control of everything. This drive to acquire territory and living space is Gruumsh's greatest motivation. He has always felt cheated by the way the gods of humanity and demi-human, so they're still using the term demi-human for elf, dwarf, gnome, and halfling, divided the world, casting aside the orcs and himself without respect. He drives his people relentlessly through the work of his priests and shamans to colonize new lands. There's the word colonize. Uh-oh, we got to watch out for that. And his deep and abiding hatred of the other gods ensures that he strives to achieve such dominion through warfare, constant and unceasing. Gruumsh tolerates no sign of peaceability from his people. Indeed, orcs have no word for peace in their language, only a guttural expletive, which means roughly temporary respite from strife. So, and then he has a hatred for Corlan Lerthian for defeating him in battle. Supposedly, Corlan took his eye. So that is the story behind that. So this is the second edition from 1992 of our journey into this story that we have here is going to be Gruumsh. Now, let's switch over to third edition. This is from the Monster Manual, third edition Monster Manual. Here's my copy of it, right? Oh, maybe if I don't move, you can see it. You can barely see it. Maybe if I do it like, yeah, there you go. There it is. We'll put the thing down here. There it is. There's my copy of the third edition Monster Manual, which I bought when it came out. This was the third edition of Dungeons and Dragons that I had played. This came out in 2000, and it was, the author in this was Skip Williams and Monty Cook, and there was one other, Jonathan Tweet. Jonathan Tweet, Skip Williams, and Monty Cook. So here we are with orcs. Now, orcs in this are chaotic evil. They are not, now they've gone from lawful evil to chaotic evil, so we're starting to see them change. But for the most, and chaotic evil is, less organized. The orcs from first and second edition seem to be very organized in their colonization of others, the taking of lands, and the expanding and their ever constant war. Now we've got chaotic evil, which means we're just going to burn everything. So orcs are aggressive humanoids that raid, pillage, and battle other creatures. They have a hatred of elves and dwarves that began generations ago and often kill them on sight. Orcs vary in appearance, but generally look like primitive humans with gray skin, coarse hair, stooped posture. So this is a little bit different than some of the things we've seen here. When not actually fighting other creatures, orcs are usually planning raids or practicing their fighting skills. Now, this sentence doesn't really go very well with chaotic evil. And orc society, orcs believe that they must survive. But orcs believe that to survive, they must conquer as much territory as possible, which puts them at odds with all intelligent creatures that live near them. They are constantly warring with or preparing to war with humanoids Now, in 3rd edition, they didn't call everything was a humanoid. So you see here, medium-sized humanoid. Everything was a humanoid that essentially had 2 arms and 2 legs and walked upright. Demi-humans was gone. Humanoid was gone. Everything was called a humanoid at that point. So they can, let's see, war with humans, including other orc tribes. They can ally with humanoids for a time, but quickly rebel if not commanded by orcs. Their deities teach them that all other beings are inferior and that all worldly goods rightly belong to the orcs, having been stolen by others. Orc spellcasters are ambitious, and rivalries between them and warrior leaders sometimes tear a tribe apart. So orc societies are patriarchal. Females are a prized possession at best and chattel at worst, and so on and so forth. And then they go through a little bit of description about half-orcs. So, and this is the first time they actually mention that Gruumsh is their god. So the chief orc deity is Gruumsh, a one-eyed god who tolerates no sign of peaceability among his people. All right, so that is the monster manual from 2000. And then we get the deities and demigods from 2002. Here it is. There it is. I've got the original here. And this was from Rich Redmond, Skip Williams, and James Wyatt. And here we have the stat block for Gruumsh. 1 eye, he who never sleeps. He is now chaotic evil. So we see that. We see that again. That's a change. He is the god of orcs, war, and territory. Gruumsh, deity of orcs, is chaotic evil. He appears as a hulking orc in black, full plate armor. He has 1 unblinking central eye. He harbors a special hatred for Corellon Lerthian, Moradin. So now we add Moradin to this and their followers. Moradin is the god of the dwarves, if you don't know. In ages past, Corellon Lerthian put out Gruumsh's left eye in a fight. Some orc clerics dispute this tale, claiming that the elven deity stole the eye because he could not beat Gruumsh in a fair fight. So now we see some change or some additions to the lore behind Gruumsh, but we're connecting Gruumsh with the orcs. That is driving the orcs to be evil. Gruumsh demands that his followers be strong, that they cull the weak from their numbers, and that they take all territory. Gruumsh thinks it rightfully is theirs, which is almost everything. He tolerates no sign of friendliness from his people. So peaceability was the word that was used before. Now it's friendliness. Unceasing warfare is his creed, though Gruumsh does not object to simple colonization if that can be arranged. Gruumsh dislikes everything that is not an orc or of orcish make, and he feels particularly spiteful towards elves. He feels equal malice towards dwarves, who contested with the orcs for control of the mountains and won a state of affairs Gruumsh regards as strictly temporary. Again, we've got an evil god who can see all the orcs, and he's going to pick out all the orcs that are weak or that turn against him, and they're gone. They're just gone. Or his priests or shamans are going to do that for him. So there's no tolerance for stepping out of line with any of his dogma. So that was from 3rd edition, from 2002. So let's go to 4th edition, which 4th edition had they had a little bit less of the lore that was in. I mean, 4th edition was only around for about 5 years total. And they had some books come out, but like the very rich history and the lore of a lot of these races was not found in, particularly with the gods, was not found in 4th edition. So here we have the 4th edition Monster Manual, and this was done by Mike Mearls in 2008. So these are the first things we're seeing from Mike Mearls now. He did most of the 4th edition stuff. So orcs worship Gruumsh, the one-eyed god of slaughter and savage, bloodthirsty marauders. That doesn't sound anything but chaotic evil or lawful evil to me. They plague the civilized races of the world and also fight amongst themselves for scraps of food and treasure. They love close combat and plunge furiously into the thick of battle, giving no thought to retreat or surrender. Within what passes for orc society, there are orcs that fill special roles. Eyes of Gruumsh are orcs with special connection to their fierce god. So these would be the priests or shamans that are going to be looking out for anybody that would turn against orc society and eliminate them, or they would cull out the weak orcs. They offer sacrifices, read omens, and advise the tribe's chieftain of Gruumsh's will. Orc blood ragers are tribal champions feared for their strength and ferocity, and they also make excellent sub-chiefs or bodyguard. Okay, so we've got another little thing about orc lore here. So orcs favor hills and mountains, places pocked by caverns easily turned into defensible lairs. Bloodthirsty marauders and cannibals, orcs venerate Gruumsh and thereby delight in slaughter and destruction. Orcs band together into loose tribal associations. The strongest individual in the tribe leads as a despotic chieftain. Orcs often demonstrate their faith in Gruumsh by gouging out one of their eyes and offering it as a sacrifice. According to myth, Corlan shot out Gruumsh's eye with an arrow. So we've got a continuation of that particular story. But again, orcs are brutal. And they don't like anything but orcs. And they follow the doctrine of Gruumsh. And again, in 4th edition, they were chaotic evil. So now we come to... Oh, and then we've got this pick also from the same book. This is Gruumsh. And the one-eyed god, chaotic evil, greater god. Gruumsh is the unblinking god of destruction who unleashes the savage multitudes against outposts of civilization. He is worshipped by orcs and half-orcs and has come to dominate some other savage humanoids as well. He's a brutal god who loathes Corlan Lerthian but denies that he lost his eye to him. Gather and breed, and your numbers shall flourish. Rise up in hordes and seize that which is rightfully yours, which is everything. Raid, kill, conquer. A lot of this, to me, doesn't sound chaotic evil, but it's like a line or gray area between chaotic evil and lawful evil. So that is the last picture that we have here. Now we're going to turn to 5th edition. So in 5th edition, we have several different entries. We've got the Monster Manual, which was written by Chris Perkins. He is the lead designer. Mike Mearls is in here too. We've got the Player's Handbook, which has an entry in it for Gruumsh, which was written by Mike Mearls. And then Volo's Guide, which was also written by Mike Mearls, and it was one of the last things that Mike Mearls wrote in 2016. So the Monster Manual and the PHB both came out around the same time in 2008. So this says, orcs are burly raiders with prominent lower canines, kind of a physical description. They worship Gruumsh, the mightiest of the orc deities and their creator. The orcs believe that in ancient days the gods gathered to divide the world among their followers. When Gruumsh claimed the mountains, he learned that they had been taken by the dwarves. He laid claim to the forest, but those had been settled by the elves. Each place that Gruumsh wanted had already been claimed. The other gods laughed at Gruumsh, but he responded with a furious bellow. Grasping his mighty sword, he laid waste to the mountains, set the forests aflame, and carved great furrows in the fields. Such was the role of the orcs he proclaimed, to take and destroy all that the other races would deny them. To this day, the orcs wage an endless war on humans, elves, dwarves, and other folk. Orcs hold a particular hatred for elves, and again, they go back into the elven god taking Gruumsh's eye. Orcs gather in tribes and exert their dominance and satisfy their bloodlust by plundering villages, devouring or driving off roaming herds, and slaying any humanoids that stand against them. After savaging a settlement, orcs pick it clean of wealth and items usable in their own lands. They set the remains of the villages and camps ablaze, then retreat whence they came, their bloodlust satisfied. Their lust for slaughter demands that orcs dwell always within striking distance of new targets. As such, they seldom settle permanently, instead converting ruins, cavern complexes, and defeated foes' villages into fortified camps and strongholds. So they do build their own thing. Now, here's the stat block for the orc, and they are chaotic evil in 5th edition. And here's the picture we got. And they talk a little bit about ogres and trolls and orogs. They do have stat blocks in here for Orc War Chief, yada, yada, yada. But they are chaotic evil in this as well. Now, if we go over to the Player's Handbook, which I have in here somewhere, Appendix B of the Player's Handbook has Gruumsh. This is it. This is all that's in here. Gruumsh, orc god of storms and war, chaotic evil, tempest and war, unblinking eye. And this is basically all they have. Now, when Mike Mearls wrote Volo's Guide to the Multiverse, I believe that's Volo's Guide to Monsters. Monsters. He had a section in here called Orcs, the Gods Sworn. To feel the thunder of orcish war drums outside the gate and to hear a chorus of voices growling Gruumsh is the nightmare of every civilized place in the world, for no matter how thick its walls, skilled its archers, or brave its knights, few settlements have ever withstood a full-scale onslaught of orcs. And then they talk about savage and fearless orc tribes are ever in search of elves, dwarves, and humans to destroy. Motivated by their hatred of the civilized races, they have a hatred, and they are taught to have a hatred, and they are bred to have a hatred of the civilized races of the world because of Gruumsh, because of Gruumsh's evil, and their need to satisfy the demands of their deities. The orcs know that if they fight well and bring glory to their tribe, Gruumsh will call them home to the plane of Acheron. Now, this is the first time that I have seen that Gruumsh is not on the plane in the Nine Hells. This is Acheron now. And then that's where they have their eternal battle with all the goblin hordes. And they've got the gods of the orcs here. And they talk about, at the pinnacle of the orc pantheon is Gruumsh One-Eye, who created the orcs and continues to direct their destiny. He is aided and abetted by other warrior deities like Bogtru and Ilnival, who bring strength and cunning to the battlefield. The followers of all three gods are tribes, raiders and ravagers, so on and so forth, but they are all thoroughly evil. Now, the next book to have the orcs in it was Monsters of the Multiverse, which was written by Jeremy Crawford, and this is where we get the first big change in Wizards of the Coast and their outlook on orcs. And this is where they started to shift and change them. Orcs trace their creation to the one-eyed god Gruumsh. Now, I want you to pay attention to what it says after this, because in here, Gruumsh is, all the lore that we got from here is that Gruumsh was vile and evil and brutal and wanted them to destroy everything and take everything for themselves. In Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse, Gruumsh is an unstoppable warrior and powerful leader. The divine qualities of Gruumsh resonate with orcs, granting them a reflection of his toughness and tenacity that cannot be matched, and the god equipped his children to be able to live above or below ground. And that's it. That's really all they say, and then they give some stats. So now we're getting a washing of the orc and Gruumsh here outside of the lore that has existed essentially since 1973. This book was published by WotC with Jeremy Crawford as the author in 2022. And so from 1973 until 2022, we basically got the same lore over and over and over again with small additions to it or small tweaks to it, but it all had the same theme. Orcs are evil. They worship Gruumsh. Gruumsh is evil. He drives them. He will get rid of any of the orcs that don't fall in line, or he has the priests get rid of the orcs that don't fall in line or that are weak. They are to destroy all other races, and they are to take everything from them, especially elves, and then dwarves. So this was the first one. Now, here is 5.24, Player's Handbook. This just came out last year in August, September. And, of course, this one was done by Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford. And we've got this picture. This picture is so not with the lore. It is so different from everything we have seen so far, and it now has washed away all of the previous lore that we had, and it has pacified all the orcs, just from looking at the picture. Orcs trace their creation to Gruumsh, a powerful god who roamed the wide open spaces of the material plane. Period. Wow. All of that lore, that was written by Gary Gygax and Rob Kuntz and Mike Mearls and Skip Williams and Monty Cook and everyone else has now been washed away completely with one sentence. Gruumsh equipped his children with gifts to help them wander great plains, vast caverns, and churning seas, and to face the monsters that lurk there. Even when they turn their devotion to other gods, orcs retain Gruumsh's gifts of endurance, determination, and the ability to see in the darkness. And then gives a description of they have greenskin. Youths on some worlds are told about their ancestors' great travels and travails. Inspired by those tales, many of the orcs wonder when Gruumsh will call on them to match the heroic deeds of old, and if they will prove worthy of his favor. So he's not evil anymore, apparently. He's gone all these years, and now he's not evil. They have completely changed it. Now, here in the Monster Manual, there are no orcs. There are no orcs in the Monster Manual at all. And in the Dungeon Master's Guide, we get a short, small thing of Gruumsh. Gruumsh is a warring god who is often described as a creator or patron of the orc people. Some orcs attribute their tenacity and toughness to Gruumsh's lingering influence. Some mythos describe a primeval conflict between Gruumsh and Corellon, which resulted in Gruumsh losing an eye, and Corellon's spilled blood becoming the first elves. And that's it. That's all they say. Again, it's washing away all the lore about Gruumsh and the orcs. Again, we just got the Monster Manual, and it's not in here. There's a conversion. There's no orcs in here except here. Except right here. So there is a column here from the 2014 stat block, and if you want to use orcs as a creature in the 2025 equivalent, 5.24 equivalent, you go down here to orc. There's the old legacy. You can see it says legacy, and you go over here to tough. Orcs are now just called toughs. No alignment. Well, they're neutral. They're neutral. Orcs here were chaotic evil, and now all of a sudden they're tough. Orc Eye of Gruumsh, chaotic evil, and now they're cultist fanatics who are neutral. Orc War Chief, which were chaotic evil, are now tough boss who are neutral. Essentially having the same stat block. These have 93 hit points. These have 82 hit points. They're not even the same level. So the Monster Manual doesn't even have them. They're completely washed out. Completely and totally washed out of here. They have gone from here, from this and this, to this and this, to this. That doesn't look like the picture I saw in the 5.24. And this and this, again, that doesn't look anything like the picture that we saw. To this and this. And nothing. Essentially nothing in the book. You know, like again, let's go back. Here is the entry of orcs in the Advanced Dungeon, not first edition, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Monster Manual by Gary Gygax. Here they are, and the description. And now we're getting a conversion with all the cutesy little Displacer beasts and the Flumph and the cutesy little Beholder. This is the orcs we get now. I think this is a total travesty. Orcs are not a playable race in any of my games. They never will be, and they will always follow along with the lore all the way up until we got 2024. All right, that is the video I have for everybody today. I appreciate everybody tuning in, and I will catch everybody